there's three main stakeholders in our programs. And if you're just coaching a team and you're not over top of an entire program, or you view your team as your program, no matter how you look at it, they've all got the three main stakeholders, no matter what. We have our players, we have our parents, and then we have our administrators. And I think it's important to look at them that way, because all three of those, especially at the high school level, play a key role in how successful, how enjoyable, how long we're going to be around somewhere. I've talked to very few coaches, and I'm not going to say it never happens, but with all the coaches that I talk to, very few of them have been let go from a coaching job for just flat out not winning. I think that obviously winning is important, but we see what happens at the college level with coaches being let go, and they certainly are let go because they didn't win enough. And some high schools operate that way, but the majority of the coaches at the high school and the middle school level, they're not let go because they didn't win enough. There's something else behind it. And I think they miss the fact that we have three stakeholders at play here. So we're going to talk about each one of these, and I'm going to give just a couple of, I think, actionable steps and things that you can implement in your program, or you can take and tweak, or maybe you already do them. It's just a reminder to continue to do them, but things that I found really helpful in my time and in talking with coaches and administrators just about what's going on in programs. First, we'll talk about players. The reason we want to be intentional about their perspective is we can create a perspective of that student athlete, that player, by the way that we interact with them, the way we do things, the way we start conversations. And I'm going to give you an example how I do this with our heads down, thumbs up playing time routine. I've done this every year I coached. This was something that I learned when I was an assistant in college. Our college coach did it, and he had been there, roughly 30 years and was a Hall of Fame coach with tons of wins and all that stuff. And I was amazed that he would do this, but it made a whole lot of sense to me, especially when I became a head coach. At the beginning of every year, we've selected our team, and we're in the team room, and I asked my players, all right, I want everybody to put your heads down, and we're basically going to play heads up, 7-up. Remember that game as a kid where you put your head down, and then when you say something, if you agree with it, you put your thumb up. If you don't, you can put your thumb down, that kind of thing. So I have them put their heads down, and then I'll go through a series of questions with them, and they can put their thumbs up depending on what they agree with. If they don't agree, they just leave it there. And so what it is the three options are: option one is everybody gets equal playing time. And I tell them beforehand, whichever one of these three options I'm about to give you, whichever one you pick, it will do it. My coaching is, I like to win, but if you all agree that we need equal playing time, and we're just going to see where the chips fall, and we'll see what happens, and we'll have a good time, and that's how you want me to coach it, I can certainly do that. So I give them the option one of equal playing time. Nobody ever puts their thumb up for that. The second option is everyone plays no matter what, win or lose. Everybody gets on the floor. Now, I'm a coach who tries to get as many kids on the floor as possible anyways. So I kind of subscribe to this a little bit, but it's not at a win or lose cost. It's just I like to get players in there. And then option three is you let the coach substitute the players to the best of my ability so that we'll get the win. And without a doubt, that third one gets everybody's thumb every single time. So what I do after that is I say, all right, hey, there's 12 of us in here. Anonymously, you all voted to have the coach substitute players to win games. So you're trusting me to make the right decision and to help us move forward and to do the best that we can based upon what I see in practice, based on how the game's going, all of those things that go into those decisions. And they all kind of shake their heads and say, yeah. And then the next thing, and this is where I say be intentional about their perspective, because they're the ones who have told me how they want me to coach them. And I truly would coach them all equally if that's what they said. I just have never had a team do that. But I tell them, what I need you to do next is I need you to go home, and I need you to let your parents know what we just did. I need you to go and to tell them, hey, we as a team, we voted that we'd like coach to substitute us to win games. And it's not about equal playing time. And it's not that everybody's going to get in a game. But I do that at the beginning of the season because I want their perspective to be that winning is important to us, and I'm going to trust coach that he's going to put us in the best position to win. And I think that starts to shape the conversation with the parent a little bit too, because I have had times where I've come back and parents come to me and they say, you know what, my son hasn't played in the last 3 games, that kind of thing. And I'm going to talk about parents here in a minute. And I'll let them know, hey, when we started the season, your son voted for me to play so that we would win the game. And these last 3 games have been really close. And I just didn't see an opportunity to put him in so that we'd have that opportunity to win still. So I've come back to that, and that's helped kind of direct the conversation with the player or the parent, whoever's asking about it. But that's one way. That's one thing that I kind of stole from the coach that I worked underneath in college, and it really has helped as we go throughout the season and we have some tough conversations with things. The next one is how cancer grows on a team. And again, this is me shaping the conversation. It's being intentional about the perspective of the athlete, not in a manipulative way where I'm trying to get something by them, but I want them to understand how teams work. And I want them to understand that they do have a voice in this. And this next one with how cancer grows on a team tells them how to use their voice. And this might be 2 or 3 days after that heads down, thumbs up thing. So we haven't played games yet. And I try to have these conversations before the games start, really maybe before we get into the last scrimmage or so, or last couple scrimmages, because that adds a whole new part of the conversation. And at least I've framed what we're doing. But how cancer grows on a team, I explained to them that cancer grows one cell at a time. There's one cell that has gone bad for whatever reason, and it goes and it attacks another cell. And then those 2 cells go and attack another cell, and it becomes 3 and 4. And eventually, depending on how aggressive the cancer is, in a medical condition, it will take over that part of the body. And it's something that certainly needs to be addressed as soon as possible to make sure that you can have a good prognosis long term. And I said, a team is very similar. What we're going to have is we're going to have a player who doesn't think they play enough. We're going to have a player that is upset because they lost and they had to run, or something happened. Somebody said something that they didn't like, or they don't think they didn't get the ball enough. Whatever it is, somebody is going to be unhappy. And what they'll do is they'll find a time when coach isn't available, and they'll find a teammate that they think will agree with them. It's a best buddy of theirs. It's somebody who also doesn't play very much. It's someone who had a similar circumstance. Maybe they both were on the losing team and had to do push-ups or something. But that person goes and finds somebody to complain to. And that the second teammate has 3 options again, and how they're going to respond to this. So we've got a person who's trying to grow their concern on the team, their cancer on the team. And do we stop it right where it's at, or do we let it continue to grow? And the second person is just as responsible as the first person is, because the second person can do one of 3 things. They can either agree and buy into it and then go search out somebody else. So that's the cancer growing. They've agreed to it, and we know everybody's not going to agree, but we can find one more at least. So now there's 3 of us on the team. The second thing is they can sit in silence. And what silence does is it tells people that you agree with them. You're not going to upset them. I don't want it to be awkward, but we're going to allow this to happen, and it looks like you agree. So now the cancerous person, the first person, thinks they have somebody on their side. So the third option, though, is to tell player 1, that they need to go talk to the coach. They need to speak up. They need to use their voice, and they need to either say, hey, you're wrong, or, I didn't see it that way, or you need to go talk to coach. They need to use their voice in some way. And I explained to them that the first person speaking up is because they're looking for somebody on their side. The second person speaking up is to give that teammate some perspective and to give them some direction as to how to fix it. Because 100% of the time, the second person who's being complained to has no control over what the complaint is. I didn't play enough. Well, that player can't change that. I didn't get to shoot enough. That player didn't change that. My team lost. That player probably didn't have anything to do with that. So we talk about that. And I talk about how cancer grows in a team early in the season, because that's when everybody has the kind of the bright eyes and they've got good intentions and everything's going well and all of that. And it's a great time for them to think about it because there's no pressure. So that's a second thing that I do in being intentional about, creating that perspective for the player. The third is create and revisit your core values. And this one really was in a coaches meeting I was on Monday. We had about 10 coaches that I met with. And this one came up several times, that the more you revisit your core values, whatever, this particular coach was at 8 non-negotiables in his program. So they have 8 non-negotiables that he went through with us. I shared the core values and how we decide what our core values are on the team, but in a lot of ways they were very similar. And this particular coach went over, the more we revisit those throughout the year, the more players are held accountable to each other. And that was huge. When they're held accountable to each other, you no longer have the issues pop up. You're constantly having that communication with those players about what's important and what they've decided are important. So for me, the core values the players decide. For the coach who started off our conversation on Monday, his were his 8 non-negotiables for his program that he's over the years has developed. But I think creating those values or those non-negotiables and then revisiting them often. Now for me, I hit those values usually once a practice for the first week after we've decided what they are. And then we revisit them about once every week or maybe every other week. And we'll do things like hand out 3x5 cards, and we'll have guys rate what they are. If there's 5 values we came up with that year, they'll rate themselves 1 to 5. How are you doing on these? And sometimes it's anonymous, and sometimes they put their names on it. Sometimes I'll ask somebody and they'll have to verbally tell us what they wrote down. I mean, I do it in a lot of different ways. You kind of got to pick your players specifically, because some kids don't like talking in front of others, and some like sharing their opinion too often and all of that stuff. Your own team. But we revisit those in a lot of different ways, and the kids can be brutally honest sometimes. And I'll tell them, man, that you rated yourself really hard. I don't think that we're that bad at it, but they'll come up with their reasons, and it's because we revisit them. So revisiting them, I think, is really important about being intentional about their perspective. And then finally, the last thing is bring your team or your program together, depending on what it's like. We bring our team together a lot. If you've been on these calls at all, you know that I've talked about, we do pre-practice meetings, and that's where a lot of our team stuff happens. And I think it really extends to the court with the team building and different conversations and activities we do. But bringing your program together, I think, is really important as well. If you get the opportunity to have your 9th through 12th graders together, maybe it's for a movie. We do what we call the Bulldog games. They're minute to win it games. So we have a bunch of them. They take us about an hour, but we use the gym, our practice time, for an hour. And all 3 of our teams are together, and they're doing these minute to win it games, competing against each other. And then we have this trophy that we made. I should have took a picture of it or something. But it's an old action figure of my son's. I took and I spray painted it gold, and we just made it kind of look crazy. But that's what they win. But it brings our program together to compete and have a good time. And I think that's important as well, just to build some camaraderie and some growth, especially this year where our freshman team only won like 2 or 3 games, and our varsity only lost 1 all season. When we came together, hey, just because everybody's not winning doesn't mean we can't have a good time and be on the same team.